This Hydro Smoky Quartz that I'm starting with, so it's laboratory grown, it's beautiful, is 3/4 of an inch long and a 1/2 inch wide. And it's not too deep. It's got a little pavilion on it, but a little bit rounded in the back, but not too deep. So this is a good wrap for this. So to get the measure and to know how many prongs I need to get around this, I just make these little strips of paper out of grid paper. I just cut them up. And then because this has a pavilion on the back, it's curved. I'm going to put it on its front. And I'm just going to loosely bring my paper around the cab, make a little pinch right there where it comes together. And this now is the circumference of my stone. Just make a little rough line there, rough line right there. So I know that my prongs need to go from here to here to get around this stone. So I'll use 13 inches of 20 gauge round soft copper wire. And these are the accordion strips that you're familiar with from last month's strip weaving series. So if you made a bunch of these, I'll show you how we can use this now to insert the gemstone, make the prong and insert the gemstone. So to make the accordion strip for this wrap, I'm starting with 13 inches. I'm going to come in about 3 inches here from the end. I'm going to use my flat nose plier. To make the prongs, I like to use my flat nose plier. This one in particular is about 4 millimeters wide. I do have a couple of different size flatheads for this purpose and for others. This one's probably 3 millimeter, and then I do have a couple of these little ones, probably 2 millimeter. And that just, helps me to size the prong without actually having to make marks on the wire for measure. So I'll get in here and just grip the end of the wire, and just to make the accordion strip, I'll go back and forth with this wire against the plier. Let me adjust the camera. Put my plier right on the edge of it, and I'll start to go back and forth with the long end of it, just moving the plier each time and staying right at its edge so that my prongs stay the same length. And I'll make these prongs, this strip, long enough to get to each mark. Periodically tap them on top just to keep them level. The wire wants to sometimes curve on you, and that's okay. Just keep it as straight and level as you can. It wants to do that, so just keep it straight. I'll show you how to adjust them once we get our length. Once I think I have the distance, I double check my measure here, and I'm a little bit over, and that's okay. I'm about 3 prongs over, and that's okay, because when I squish these down, it's going to shorten up to about this length. I probably could have stopped right here, made my prongs, and then figured out how many more I need. But I know it's about 3 prongs at this gauge. So once you have your prongs done, or your accordion strip done, you'll make the prongs by squeezing each of these heads together, and you'll just keep your fingers here to keep that side level, and just squeeze the prong and then squeeze on top. Put your plier right in there, squeeze the prong. Try to not let it flip over on itself, but sometimes that happens. Squeeze the tip of it, and then squeeze the body. Just work all the way over, and then we'll make them a little more even to each other. If it's hard for you to hold them with your hands to do this, you can get a second plier, like your nylon jaw, if you think you can do 2 pliers. Just hold on to it right there with a nice hearty handshake grip. Squeeze, move the plier, squeeze it together, squeeze the top, and keep moving through these. I'm fine to just do it on my finger right here. Just don't slip and pinch your finger. See how sometimes they flip over on themselves. And I'll do this last one. I've got a nice strip of prongs. And then right here at this very last one, just going to turn it flat and make it level with the line of the back of the prongs here. So I can tie another wire on there. Just get right to the edge, try to make it level. And that looks pretty good. Don't have to worry if they're a little bit wonky. Just fix them with your fingers. Okay, and that's pretty good. I'll just go through if I have any real odd ones, and I'll just squeeze, clean them up a little bit, squeeze the body of them. Then go back through and squeeze the top. This is also hardening the wire as you squeeze it all together like this. And I'll check my length after this. If it gets a little curvy, just do like that. Get your prong wire nice and straight, and then come up here, check against your measure, and you'll see, I like to put this prong right on the inside of the line. You'll see we actually need to add a prong, right? Because I'm short one. I don't have to, probably, because I could meet, you know, at the top, just right off the shoulders. So I don't necessarily need to add another prong to the edge there, but this is what you're checking for, to make sure that you have enough closed prongs to make this distance. So you see it shrank about 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so we'll tie another wire on. I'll get a piece of 18 gauge round soft copper wire. So now for the frame, the main frame, I'm going to take a length of 18 gauge round soft copper wire, and this is also cut to 14 inches long. And I'll just center this prong wire. It doesn't have to be exact. You'll have plenty to wrap this. I gave this a little extra because maybe your rock's bigger or your cabochon's bigger, but I'm just going to center these prongs roughly in the middle here. And I'm going to use 3 feet of 28 gauge round weaving wire. And I've got that 28 gauge on my weaving spool here. So I'll just take a leading couple of inches. I'll make a couple of wraps around this wire, the end of this wire here, and I'm also fighting the camera here. And I'll get my weaving wire attached. Let me change this camera so I can get a little closer. Okay. So I've got 2 or 3 wraps right here to start. And then I'm going to make 5 single wraps along the bottom wire. And I think 5 will get me to the valley in between these first 2 prongs here, and then I can grab them. So once I get the first couple done, then I should know, you know, if it's 5 or 6 between each of these. So there's 2, 3, and sometimes you have to fight that prong loop a little bit. There's 4. There's 5. And I think now I am to the center, maybe 6. No, I think 5's got it. Make sure you're, you know, all close together here. Make sure the coils are nice and tight so that you have a proper count. So that's 5. And now I'll go around both wires right here. To grab that prong strip. and then I'll do another 5 and repeat. Once you have the first couple prongs wrapped on, it'll get a lot easier to handle this strip. I'm also dodging the camera here, so I find that making these is quite soothing. So every 2 or 3, you can get your nylon jaw. Give a nice gentle tap to level the wires out. And as you work, just keep them flat like this and just work so that each coil is neat and there are no bubbles or loose wires, loose loops. Get the tension tight enough that you don't have any bubbles, but not so tight that this wire can't live up on top here. It's on top of the bottom wire, not to its side. Okay? And if it falls over, you just tap. Tapping will help with your nylon jaw, flattening it as you work. Will help to keep the prong wire up there. So there's 2. You don't have to hold on so tight. Just make sure the back wires stay nice and straight as you work. Give your hands some breaks as you go. And then here at the end, I'll just make a couple of wraps. And I'll leave myself about 3 or 4 inches here of weaving wire. Cut my spool off. Give a tap with my nylon jaw and make sure everything's nice and straight. Okay, and that looks pretty good. Now before I bend this around the stone, I'm going to bend these prongs forward. It'll be easier to do it while they're straight. So I'll get my thinner flat nose plier. You could also do this with your chain nose plier, the pointy one. And I'm just going to grab about the first 1 millimeter of each prong, brace my thumb here, and do a little bend on it. Okay? Try to bend the prong heads together. This one's probably needs to go a little bit more. You're not bending them over. This one's probably too much. We'll have to adjust them also, but you're getting this pre-bend on them. I'd say about a quarter of a bend, quarter circle. It's easier to do this now than after you take this around the stone and the stone is in there. So I just do this. You can also mark the depth of your plier if you're uncertain about the length, but close enough is pretty good. For now, and then we can adjust. Okay? So I've got this kind of downward point on all of them. So this is now the inside of the prong basket. And because my gemstone is not flat on the one side, it has a bit of a pointed back, I'm going to lay it on its belly and start the initial bend. My prongs are up in the air. And with my finger, I can just kind of start it in the middle here. I'll try to hold it up here so you can see. You would be down on your board. I'm just going to work these prongs together. So you'd be down here. So you would be down here with the flat side of your stone against the board. And you just work these wires around your stone. My stone is on its belly because it's rounded in the back. But once I get this curve, I can turn it over. So let me get a little closer now. So I've got it curved around my stone. It would look good this way too. And I'm going to flip mine so that the back is actually in the back. And you can, yours, if you're using a cabochon, the flat side would be to the back. Keep them tied up right here nice and neat. And once you get up here to the top, just use your fingers, go back and forth, bring them together, and try to center them. That's pretty good. If you're using a faceted gemstone like mine, it might tilt a little bit. And that's okay, you just work it. Okay, so I've got enough, mine's not so deep that I don't point out the back too much. But we are going to drop these wires down and go once around here. So for instance, this one, I've come around, you know, once or twice for the back of this guy. And that sits fairly nice on its back without tilting. So that's kind of, you'll have to make a decision based on yours. We'll come around once. You might have to go 2 layers if yours is real deep. And then it's sitting belly up against the top of my prongs so that its edge is just, you know, just below those prongs. And mine's still a little jiggly. It's, you know, doing this because it's not all tied in there. And I don't want to get it tied in until I'm sure I'm happy. And then we'll lower the prongs some more once we get it all set up. So once you're happy with that, you can use the few inches that we left ourselves here. Let me just get my plier and I'm going to do this a little cleaner. So I'm just going to pinch it right there. Make mine a little bit sharper. Good. Let's make sure that my 2 top prongs are even and that the prongs have the body. Once I get that, these wires will be side by side, 2 by 2, and I'll just make a quick wrap around the neck with this little extra bit of 28 gauge just to get them together. I'll clip this other one off so that we don't get confused. Clip this shorty off down here to the inside. Okay, so I've just got this neck wrapped a couple of times to help me hold it. And I've got the 2 smaller wires in the front, which are the 20 gauge wires, the shorter ones. I'm just going to lift them more to the front and isolate them up here. Pull them away from the other 2, just like that. Get rid of it down here as well. It's just temporary until I get my main. I don't have enough in this little 28 gauge to weave, so it's just there to help me hold on to things until I get the next wire up. And so I'll take 4 feet of 28 gauge to make this weaved bale. We're going to do this figure 8 weave on the bale. You can use 3 feet, 4 feet, depends on how wide you go. I'm going to get my spool. Got my 28 gauge weaving wire. I would use 4 feet to make sure you have enough distance without having to add some wire. I'll just bend these 2 out to the side, and if you know, if you have a grid paper, you might align this to the middle and make sure your bends are evenly apart. The space between them, I like about 1/2 inch, but you can make that whatever you'd like. We're going to weave to about 1/2 inch, and then we'll put the wires back together and weave for another 1/2 inch. So about 4 feet of weaving wire, 28 gauge. I'll just slip into the edge of the neck here, hold on to a couple of inches, and the stone is still a little wobbly, you know, until we get it all put together a little bit more secure once we get our bale done and dropped over. So I'm going to make a figure 8. I'll do a 360 around this lower wire to get it anchored. Come over it again, dive in between them, come to the opposite side, do a 360 around this top wire, come between them. It's like a 1 1/2, so the half is the pass between them. It's a figure 8. Do a 360 around this wire, and then the half passes over. Do 360 around this wire. Then at the half weave, pass over. We're making sure each coil lands side by side. This is the same weave as your dragon veins bale. I'm just using 18 gauge round here instead of 2 wires, I think is what we use in the other one. It might be the same as this, I'm not sure. But you can do this with 1 wire to each side. You can do it with 2 wires. I like the 18 gauge, so I just do it with, 1. Okay, so you'll weave this figure 8 until you reach about a half an inch up the wires. Once you get to about a half an inch, or whatever distance you like, I like to bring the 2 wires back together again. And what you're looking for is to stay center where they crisscross up top there. So center, right? And then right there where they crisscross, this is about a half an inch of bare wire. I can bring them straight again. Just hold on to them right there where they cross. Get your flat nose and give a little pinch. And they should go straight back up for you. And then you can continue to weave. I'm going to bend these a little bit more forward so they're not poking at us in the eyes. Alright, and I'll just weave until I get to the other side. You'll have to hold this weave back as you work from the wide part back into the narrows. It wants to slip forward quite a bit. So I've just got it on the pad of my finger to help me hold the weave back as I work. So I do a 1 1/2, that's a 360 1/2. Go to the other side, 360, and then pass through, get right next to the previous weave, do 360 around that frame wire, come over and pass back through. So it's a figure 8, and as you work, you'll just keep your coils pushed back. So you'll weave to here. Alright, and when I get to the end, I like to go about 5 more millimeters. Just another few wraps to get these 2 wires together. That's pretty good. Okay, then you take your nylon jaw, give a little bit of a tap, and then right here at the center where it's widest, you can either use your finger or you can use a rounded plier, a round nose plier or a baling plier. I'm just going to use my fingers, and I'll just bend it in half right at its widest point. And I'll bring those 2 wires straight down the back until the neck meets. So just like that. I'm going to remove some of this little beginning wire I had here. So I'll snip this guy out. Just left it behind there. And I can take these 2, if I want to embed another gemstone up there, I could do some other kind of designs with these 2. I'm going to do design with these 2. So now that I have my bale wrapped, I'm just going to cut the spool off and leave myself about 6 inches of 28 gauge here. I'll wrap all the way around this neck as neatly as I can, working down towards the gemstone to get the neck tied on there. You just make 3 or 4 little wraps, nice and neat. Then come here to the back. Take this wire and just go around these 2 about 5 times.